Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Arrogant. So in this video I'd like to compare these three journals. So when you have three of them, you can see you will deal an additional hit for weapon damage. On top of this, these journals will also give you stacks of power percentage, 0.5 per book, along with some hit points. Now the downside to these journals is when they're upgraded to Mythic, they only give 300 item level. Now with this new Echoes of Prophecy campaign, we can go and obtain artifacts that have 1000 item level when upgraded to Mythic. Along with that, the new trial, the Demogorgon one, you can also obtain a new artifact, Demogorgon's Reach, and they all give you a ton of item level, 1000 each. So you're losing out on 700 item level for choosing a Storyteller Journal over one of those new artifacts. We have Demogorgon's Reach here. I also have the Neverwinter Standard, as those two are pretty much free to obtain. The Demogorgon's Reach, a bit of luck and grinding involved. As for the third artifact, well, unfortunately that is locked behind a paywall with this Echoes of Prophecy. You can see here being the last package there, the Jewel of the North artifact, and this would then give you 3 artifacts to get 1000 item level on each of them. Now, as soon as you swap out one of these artifacts, you can see we'll now no longer have that additional hit for weapon damage on a crit. You're going to need 3 of these Storyteller Journals to actually make it worth using them at all. There's no point running just 2 of them. You could run just one, the Envenom Storyteller Journal, as your primary to give you action points and that extra damage bonus just for like artifact calls and so on. Having your daily power for then is absolutely a big bonus. However, we're moving into the phase where Envenom Storyteller Journal, you don't really need it too much. It's generally easy enough to get your action points every minute or so, at least in most boss fights. So you'd be just as well switching to an artifact that's going to help out your whole party deal more damage, like your Demogorgon's Reach, applying that debuff on enemies so they take more damage, and also like your Neverwinter Standard, allowing your allies to deal more damage as well as having increased recharge speed for 15 seconds. So would you go and actually use these high level artifacts over the Storyteller Journals if you had them? Or let's say they release the Storyteller Journals again, would you go out of your way to obtain them? And this is a question I've put to myself and went and done some math and testings to figure that out. Now the initial math that I did here, you can see here's the stats, the buff, and this would just be the item level difference alone, along with the stacks of power. You can see here, this is the item level difference, 252 base damage difference. This is item level base as if you had 60,000 item level, and then this would be adding on those artifacts. If you have a lower amount of base damage, then increasing your base damage by 252 will give you an even more benefit. Now you can see that you will lose a bit of power by having the 1000 item level artifacts instead of the journals. As for your stats, you'll probably generally just fine balancing them. Even this power loss, you'll probably be able to catch it up fairly easy. It's just for the math right here, and you can see the difference is in favor of the 1000 item level artifacts by 2.6%. If you go and take into consideration that the journals will deal an additional hit every time you deal a crit, so that's based on this 90% chance you have here, and you'll deal 66% of this base damage because enemies have some damage resistance. And if you were able to get one journal proc, so that would be the additional hit every second, then you would equate to this being basically the difference in favor still of the 1000 item level artifacts, but that's a 0.34% of a difference. That's next to no difference. But as soon as you can get more than one of those additional hits on a crits, you can already see straight up there, you nearly have a 2% difference in favor of the Storyteller Journals. So we've had to take it a step further and do some actual dummy tests to see. So I slotted all of my Storyteller Journals and we went and we hit a dummy we went and hit the dummy with our lowest cast time at will, so Duelist Flurry, so we could get as many of those Lost Mouth procs as possible. And this was our result here. The encounter DPS is your damage per second. So this is our average damage we deal every second, 62,227. Now we went and compared that then with the setup of not using those Storyteller Journals, but using these 3 1000 item level artifacts instead. I even went as far as removing one of my collars because I don't actually have the third 1000 item level artifact. And then we made the test again. And this is the same test, but this time not having the 3 Storyteller Journals. So we no longer have our Lost Mouth Vengeance. And you can see we only have 60,219 encounter DPS. So there is a reduction there by nearly 2,000 encounter DPS. That's losing out on a decent chunk. And if we do the math there, you can see that this is our results here. We have our Duelist Flurry and we got a difference of over 3% in favor of using the journals. However, we switched to our Gloaming Cut, which is an at-will that's going to deal heavy damage but has a longer cast time, meaning we're going to get less hits per second. Therefore, we're not going to get as many of those procs from our journals. Now, using our Storyteller Journals and having this Gloaming Cut, we can see that we were dealing 62,396 DPS. That was with our Lost Mouth Vengeance. And if we go and compare that to what we have then with the artifacts, the 3 1000 item level artifacts, you can see we were dealing 62,955 encounter DPS, meaning we were dealing more damage per second without the Storyteller Journals with our Gloaming Cut. And this is due to the fact that you're going to have more item level just by having those higher level artifacts, and that gives us more base damage. And these are the 2 tests here. We have the Duelist Flurry test and the Gloaming Cut test. And you can see with Gloaming Cut, when we have an at-will that takes over a second to cast, we were having more damage, nearly 1%, just by having higher item level. What we can conclude is that if you have an at-will, whenever you would use it between using encounter powers, then you'll gain more damage from the journals if it's a low cast time. If it's lower than 1 second, if it's higher than 1 second, you'll end up with the journals not getting enough procs to make up the difference with just increasing your item level. So we can look at the other different classes within Neverwinter and make some deductions. And we can see with the Rogue, yes, the journals are pretty good because you generally will use Duelist Flurry a lot just to keep up those bleeds, and the rest of our encounter powers can be cast pretty quickly as well. Then you have on the Warlock a Hand of Blight, which is a very low cast time, so you'll be able to get many of those procs from the journals. The Hunter Ranger, I'm not entirely sure since their cast time is 1 second on their high damage aimed shot. This again is just for all single target. For AoE, the journals are definitely going to be better because you'll be able to get those hits on all your different targets for all your AoE attack powers, your encounters and your at-wills. So I'm not entirely sure on the Ranger Hunter. You'd have to go and test it for yourself, but I'm assuming it's going to be very, very close. As for that Barbarian, you have a 0.65 second cast time at will. You can get this cast nice and quickly, so the journals are probably going to benefit you there. Same with the Fighter again, same with the Bard, the Staccato. The Cleric, on the other hand, they generally don't get a lot of damage from their at wills at all, despite their Lance of Faith having a low enough cast time, but then they have their Conflagrate, which is nearly a 2 second cast time. It's awful. So clerics with just having burst damage from their encounter powers are generally going to want to stick with these new item level artifacts. As for Paladin, tanking side, if you want some more damage, you probably are still better off with those journals just for that base damage on each of your Oath Strike hits. And we do have Forte as our crit, so we'll have a bit higher chance to crit. As for a Wizard, I'm not really sure what at-wills they generally use in single target. I really don't play a Wizard like at all. Their cast times go from 0.35 to 0.7 on their decent at wills. They do have a few that are like 1.7 seconds, but I'm assuming you're not really going to use those. They didn't have much higher magnitudes on those powers. You might use them once in between your rotations. So again, I'm assuming the journals there would be pretty good, but take all this with a grain of salt. Make sure to check out people's updated builds and so on. Now, many of you guys might not have the journals, and it is what it is, so just go for these artifacts instead. The journals, sure, they might come around in the Zen market every now and again, but in my opinion, they're just way too overpriced for their benefit. The difference in the damage they give is really minimal. You can see that here. As soon as you have a class which has a lower hit rate per second, you can see it's already then in favor of just having the higher level artifacts. And having higher level artifacts will just mean that your daily powers, your big hitting ones, will just deal more damage, along with your mount power like your golden touch with 3000 magnitude. So hopefully this has been somewhat insightful to you guys. I've went through each of the classes and what ones I do suggest just sticking with the journals or the artifacts. In my opinion, if you've already got the new artifacts, stick with them. If you've already got the journals, stick with them, unless maybe you're a cleric or you're a min-maxer and you just want to squeeze out that top 1% extra damage. So again, I'd like to give a massive thank you to all of my channel members for helping me keep my channel going. And if I presented this well, consider leaving the video a like, and if you're new around here, consider subscribing. I'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.